Hi everyone, welcome to 2025. Hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season, but now with the new year is a new year of jazz guitar instruction, and I cannot think of a better way to get it started than with our next guest. Greg of FretDojo had a chance to sit down with Jens Larsen, a man who has amassed over 500,000 subscribers here on YouTube. If you spend any time at all on YouTube and you're a student of jazz guitar, you've no doubt have seen his videos and have probably already learned quite a bit from him already. Well, Greg had a chance to sit down and talk about a lot of things, but the state of jazz guitar instruction, some tips that he likes to impart on to his students, lessons that he himself has learned about teaching, and a variety of other subjects. So I think you're going to find this fascinating. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Jens, let me give you just a quick rundown of his bio. Jens Larsen began playing guitar at age 12 and, after earning a degree in mathematics and computer science, followed his passion for jazz to the Royal Conservatory in The Hague, graduating cum laude with a master's degree. He has performed with legends like Jim McNeely, Slide Hampton, and Michael Brecker. He has graced iconic stages like the North Sea Jazz Festival and composed award-winning music, including recognition from the International Songwriting Contest. And as a founding member of the acclaimed jazz quartet Treben, his album Push has earned international praise. In recent years, he has toured Taiwan, Spain, and Iceland, while also performing with the renowned Conrad Kasselbeck Big Band. Alongside his impressive performance career, he has made a lasting impression as a trailblazer in jazz guitar education. From teaching educational skills at the Royal Conservatory in The Hague to building an absolutely massive YouTube channel, he's earned widespread recognition as one of the leading educators in the jazz guitar space. Be sure to stick around for the end of this video where we have a very special offer for you from FretDojo. But now, let me present to you Mr. Jens Larsen.
Okay, Jens, welcome to the show. Fabulous to have you at FretDojo.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here. It's a long list of really famous guitar players, in fact, that you guys have had on the podcast. It's quite impressive.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, no, we just seem to strike up a lot of conversations with guys across the world. So yeah, it's but likewise yourself, you're possibly one of the most famous jazz guitarists of all time. The YouTube channel that you have. Make sure everyone watching this or listening to this, make sure you check out Jens' YouTube channel. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I've been very impressed by your amazing following that you've been able to get together on YouTube there. It's absolutely fantastic.
It's similar to learning jazz guitars. If you keep at stuff for long enough, then of course it pays off and you get a bit better at it. I've been doing, because actually this year I've been doing YouTube for 10 years, which is also kind of mind-blowing.
Oh,
but,
congratulations. Wow.
I don't know how that was for you. Like, I got started because I was realizing that people came to my website and checked out transcriptions that I had on there. And then somebody showed up at a gig with one of my bands. And I thought, well, okay, so if I have more stuff on my website, they come there and then they might come to my gigs, to the concerts because we were working really hard to get the band promoted. And then I thought, okay, I'm gonna make some more stuff. And first I just started I put up some more transcriptions, and then I also started to put some lessons up there. But I couldn't really, it's just some website from some random Danish guitar player. It's not really getting anywhere. So I needed to promote that in some way, and I started looking around. And then I realized that at the time, there was this website. I think the website is still there, but it's not as big anymore, which was called Ultimate Guitar.
Oh, yeah.
And you could upload lessons to that website.
Oh, really? Oh,
and then you could link to your own website, and it would have to be the same lesson essentially. But you could just link to it, and then you could say, well, if you want to download the examples or something, you can still. So I started doing that, and then I started to, of course, meet people. That got me a lot more traction with lessons, and I got a lot of response over there. And there's also, you get used to all the heavy metal trolls on Ultimate Guitar, and that was a party. And I started to meet some of the people that are still around that I know, like Ben Eller, David Wallerman, and fellow Australian Chris Super. Mm-hmm. And especially Chris, I I talked to quite a bit, and he was doing YouTube videos, and he kept telling me like, you should do YouTube videos. And I was thinking, well, video? Oh, I'm not sure that's me. But then finally he convinced me to try it out. And then I started changing to make videos instead of just making blog posts. And that really sort of caught on. And gradually, I mean, the beginning it was just to get people to come to the concerts and get more recognition. I used it also to get well, not a sponsorship, but I got endorsed by Ibanez before we went on tour in Canada. So like a lot, just getting some stuff going, you know. And well, that worked out quite well. But then it sort of became its own thing. You start to realize, okay, actually, this YouTube thing, it's kind of it can do something. I'm not exactly sure what I should do with this. I got asked to make lessons that I could sell, maybe make longer things. And I actually even got requests for making a newsletter because they didn't feel that they would get served the videos. So sort of all these things that are sort of part of being an online educator sort of became requests from people who were following it. And then gradually that just became more of what I do. So I stopped doing, well, at the time, I was teaching at the conservatory here in The Hague, and I was also teaching at a music school. And then I just sort of gradually phased that out and focused more and more on just doing online education instead. And now I'm still doing stuff like being the external at the final recitals for conservatories and stuff like that. But I'm not teaching anymore. And then I'm just doing courses and Patreon and lots of YouTube. Not unlike you, I guess.
Well, it's interesting you say that about your journey with YouTube because likewise, I started getting into blogging as a bit of just a side thing. I didn't think much of it. I was just kind of sharing what I was working on. And then I only started a YouTube channel because I wanted to have some videos on my blog posts, but I just needed a platform to put them on. That's all I thought about it. There was literally no strategy. I wasn't I didn't think there would be an audience for this on YouTube. It was literally just a media storage place. and then I remember I posted a few videos there, and I kind of left it alone for a while. And I came back about 6 months later, and there was like hundreds of thousands of views on one of those videos. It's like, what? Well, there must be something to this. So yeah, it's a very very powerful platform for reaching out to people and building a community and a following. So yeah, it's and yeah, there's no better example than what you've put together there, Jens. It's very inspiring.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think later for me, I guess it did sort of come back to being something that I am using to promote my music or to get work as a musician. Because while most of the time when I'm making videos, it's really about the teaching. It's not so much about me as a performer. And also, I guess the reason why I started making all the blog posts and the videos in the beginning was really that I had some things where I felt like I found some ways to learn it that were not the ways that were most commonly taught, and also not the ways that I've been taught that really helped me. And it felt a little bit like there's something missing out there. So I want to put that out there. And that's been a part of the mission as well. And also what I saw from one of the things I taught was the young talent department. So I was actually teaching like 12-year-olds to play jazz standards. And that gives you a certain perspective on how do you actually introduce the music in a more natural way to people who don't know, who haven't read 2,000 theory books, you know. So stuff like that gives you a different way of looking at things. But it also indeed did, to return to that, it did kind of become a gateway to also get some opportunities as a musician. So in recent years, I've been lucky enough to also be asked to perform as a guest soloist or work together with people all over the world. And also in places that I would never imagine, like I've been in Taiwan last year and Iceland and the States. And, you know, it's crazy. It's amazing.
It's amazing once you open that door. Like you never know what happens once you start a channel like that. Something that really resonated with me with what you said was how you're teaching 12-year-olds how to play, because really, like, we need to teach adults in that way often and as well. It's not to kind of sort of belittle adults, but we are just like big kids that need some core, very clear concepts, that isn't sort of so bound up in theory, isn't it? Like I find that that's something that can be a bit of a problem with a lot of jazz theory books and things like that out there. They seem to bind everything up in all this jargon and sort of make it seem so much more complex than it kind of needs to be,
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And that's also something where you start sort of thinking about how you learned and thinking back, because I didn't, like you, I didn't learn when there was a lot of internet lessons around stuff. And I didn't realize that actually until this year, that I didn't really know any theory when I was learning in the beginning. I was just playing the songs. Sometimes I would just have a chord where I only knew the 4 chord tones that worked, and the rest, like, I didn't know what would be there. And then I would just go by ear and what I could make good. And some of that would be the right choices, some of that wouldn't be. But it does get in the way if you know too much, but you don't have it in your fingers and in your ears, then then it can actually get in the way. And I've really found that sort of trying to cut back on that and just starting with a whole picture and then adding detail is much better than starting with all the detail and then trying to put that in place while you're playing. Because what I'm also well aware of, and I think most guitar players are well aware of, is that we do not think a lot when we're playing. It has to be. It's like driving a car. You're not thinking about everything. You're not thinking about now I have to go right, so I have to pull. This one has to go down, and this, it's like I don't even know if it has to go down or up. I just do it right every time because otherwise people die. So, and the same should be the case with guitar, right? You need to know it so well that you're only thinking about, okay, I want to go there, and then that should be there. It has to be sort of a really high level decision, and it has to be completely automatic. And that's very difficult to learn if you get 2 pages of details that you have to memorize first. That's nobody learns like that. So it's true. You need to sort of scale it down and give really clear instructions and build it up stepwise. And actually, for me, so that's actually, in a way, it's easier if you're teaching kids, because they're not used to not understanding things. Like that's their whole life is not understanding anything that happens around them almost, and then trying to learn it. Where as adults, we're much more used to looking at things and figuring them out and then dealing with them. And in this case, that can sometimes work against you, because if you can get too obsessed with whether that dominant has a sharp 11, and what you should be thinking about is just, what did I play? Did it sound wrong? Really, it kind of has to stop there. And then you don't have to worry about any specific notes and stuff, because you're playing a solo, it's like, or you're comping or whatever it is, it's in a different context. So that is definitely something where I think details and too much theory, especially too much theory, is really getting in the way. And I actually see that quite a lot also in my courses.
Yeah, it's a bit like I love what you said that then. It's I'm imagining like a scaffold that's helping create a beautiful statue, but all these guys are kind of looking at the scaffold as if that's the statue, but the scaffold actually is the thing that might help to build the statue, but in the end it needs to fall away, doesn't it? And you don't have that anymore. It's just a stepping stone.
Yeah, exactly.
Where did you start with guitar and jazz? Like, was it as a very young child? How did this kind of journey evolve from you into jazz guitar and jazz music?
I'm the opposite of what I was teaching with the young talent. So I started playing guitar. I started playing classical guitar because that was the only lessons you could have in the small town in Denmark where I'm from. Okay. So you could only have classical guitar lessons. So that was when, and essentially I started playing guitar because my best friend had guitar lessons on Thursday, so he couldn't play with me. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to have guitar lessons. I had classical guitar lessons forever. I wanted to play other stuff, but that was just not an option. At some point in high school, I could join the high school band. And because I could play classical guitar and I could read, then I could be in the band and I could play. They played mostly sort of blues classics and we also played a few old jazz tunes like Moody Indigo and stuff, which I couldn't solo on, but then you sort of get into the whole thing, like, here's a pentatonic scale and now you need to figure out what to do. And I played some musicals with the high school as well. So my first guitar solo ever was on Greased Lightning from
Really?
Grease.
Oh, far out. There you go.
Which was not an improvisation. It was composed because I didn't really know what to do with it. So and that was just I loved that. I really started to realize that with classical guitar, I love playing classical guitar because I love making music. But I also realized that classical guitar was very much alone. So I did at some point have like some duos with a violin player, and that was just a lot more fun also. Um, but I was aware of that, and even though my classical guitar teachers also suggested, well, maybe you want to think about doing conservatory for classical guitar. In the end, I ended up studying computer science and
Oh,
mathematics
really?
instead.
Okay.
So I did a degree in that first.
Right.
And actually, it wasn't until this time that, because once I was in the university, I started to play in rock bands.
Hmm.
And I had a few bands that I was playing in next to the university. And that's where I started to discover jazz. Essentially, what happened was that I was trying to find out what fusion music I liked. And I didn't like any fusion music at all the stuff. And then I just got a Charlie Parker CD at the library by mistake, or just
By
like
mistake.
curious, like, oh, I know the name. I wonder what this is. I'm just gonna take this one as well. And then I checked that out, and I was like, and because I'd been really sort of heavily into Stevie Ray Vaughan, and like I have this Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat that's hanging. Can I point to that? That's there.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
difficult.
yeah.
So I came from all the Muddy Waters, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix, all that stuff really resonated with me. And Parker playing like sort of medium blues. Like there's some stuff in there where I was like, I have no idea what that is. And then there's some stuff that I'm just, oh, this is blues, and I completely get it, And that was sort of my intro to that. And I could that resonated much more with me in terms of sound and how that worked, because it's rougher. All the fusion stuff was much more like the 80s pop music, which I didn't really like. The first two things I sort of got into with jazz were Charlie Parker and John Scofield. This was when I was 22, so I really started late with jazz.
Yeah.
And it took me only a year to realize that this is what I want to do. So I had to sort of finish my bachelor's degree in mathematics as fast as possible so that I could figure out how to, even though this was like everybody was saying that that's like certainly my parents were like telling me that was completely crazy. Also because at the time, the bachelor education was not a thing in Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
you couldn't get work with it. But that was,
Oh.
for me, was kind of nice, because then I could finish the education and I wouldn't have to really get a job. I couldn't get a job because I wasn't qualified for it.
It was like an excuse.
Yeah, it actually became an excuse. So I finished the university, and then I enrolled in different sort of preparatory schools to get to the conservatory
I see.
in Copenhagen, studying, and now also just studying jazz and trying to figure out how that worked, which was a lot of fumbling, and I didn't have super good lessons in the beginning. There's a lot of stuff that I could have learned a lot faster if I had better lessons, for sure.
Imagine if your own YouTube channel was around there. That would
Yeah, maybe.
be good.
But at the same time, I mean, there's also so what I also said earlier. There's something to be said for having all the good information now, but you also just have a lot of information, and it's difficult to say if you would have taken all the good information or if you've just been overwhelmed with all the information, because that's definitely difficult right now. But yeah, so I was doing these preparatory schools for conservatory. I did entrance exam in Copenhagen. I didn't get in because it's very difficult to get in there. And also at the time, because I was 22, I was considered too old. So they told me, well, you passed the exam, but there are, we have 50 entrance exams, and we take 2 people, and you're over 20, so you're kind of old.
Man, I'm feeling really old now. I don't think I was
Yeah,
that old.
that was really weird for me also. It was
Yeah.
like I could tell, and when I was talking to him, to the leader of the school, the jazz department, I could feel that he wanted to tell me that I didn't have a chance, but he didn't say so because he couldn't really say that when I passed the exam. I think everybody gets told at some point, like, okay, don't do this. I've had teachers also tell me in the beginning, like, oh, just go back to studying mathematics and stuff. That's way better. And also, I have to say, now that I have kids, I'm also thinking, well, music is easier as a hobby than it is as a profession, for sure. I mean, I see a lot of people who did conservatory and have essentially the same education as me, and they're really changing careers now. So I get the thought of it, of course, but for me that was not really the thing. And so after not being accepted to Copenhagen, I managed to get lessons with the teacher who teaches there. And I also heard about this, because this was all in Denmark, and I actually live in the Netherlands. And I heard about this school in The Hague, which was like a conservatory, but they were only teaching bebop. And that was a dream come true for me, because I didn't really want to play pop music. I just wanted to play jazz. In Denmark and Germany and Sweden, it's very difficult to get into a conservatory because they only have a certain amount of seats available every year. But in Holland at the time, they just took everybody who could do the education. So if you pass the exam, you're in, and then they'll get paid for you. So that made that a lot easier, which is also why I was sort of in the first year of a wave of a lot of Danish people. There were more Danish people in my year than there were Dutch. Because everybody heard like, oh, you can go there and you can actually get accepted and get an education, you know.
I think that's really inspiring, because like where there's a will, there's a way, you know, and you can see what's happened in your amazing career since then. And I think that's a good reminder for people that might have taken a few knocks and sort of people have said no to them. Like almost your story is reminding me a little bit of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who I don't know if you know this, but for 5 years, it was on a recent documentary I watched of Schwarzenegger, where he was trying to get a placement as a leading man, but he kept getting laughed at or said no, like over and over again. But it went for 5 years. He did this. So like that's persistence. You just got to keep going, and where there's a will, there's a way.
That is definitely the way with jazz, I think, or with learning any instrument or any style. You need to persist at it, and then you can sort of figure. And it's also, you have to also realize like what length will you go to. I was definitely prepared to move to another country to just have the time to study and really get a lot better. Because that was all I wanted to do. I wasn't really caring about anything else. But it is true. I mean, you can learn to start at a late age and still learn. But also, I don't know when Wes started. Wes started late as well.
Was it in his 20s? It was yeah, it wasn't like he was a kid. I think he had maybe a 3 or 4 string guitar as a kid, but he couldn't really play it much or anything. Yeah, but yeah, it all started. I think he listened to a Charlie Christian album being played at a dance meetup or something like that, and he listened to it, and he just became obsessed with Charlie Christian, and so like bought a guitar and bought the records and just like worked out every note at home. Yeah, unbelievable.
It is really just about sort of keep really being persistent and getting and staying with it. The conservatory was in many ways the most fun part of my entire life, in the sense that you're really passionate about something, and then you get 4 or 6 years to just be busy with that and hang around with people, play a ton of music, you know, and everybody's just trying to get better. Everybody's just trying to play well. If you don't, I mean, there's like with any study, there's some stuff that's going to get in your head, and you have to do all these other subjects and stuff. But at the same time, you're just there to play music and have fun. And
a question I have for you, Jens, is because obviously you came from like mathematics, computer science, that sort of side of things. Did that help you look at music in a different way to maybe your peers, or this is just a sort of a sidewindy question, I guess. Like, I'm just interested to see if you had a particular angle that's kind of helped you understand jazz from that perspective.
Don't really think so. I mean, it is at the same time, I know that there are a lot of mathematicians, there are a lot of sort of science students that also play jazz. That there is, it's very often something that kind of goes together. If I look at especially the Danish jazz scene, I know that that's the case. But I don't feel like that really made that much of a difference. What I did think made a difference was actually being older, because I already had an education. I was used to having lessons. I was a little bit more mature, and I was able to sort of distance myself from all the lessons. What you see when you're teaching at a conservatory is with the young students, very often, if you tell them that they need to learn a skill, they can't really take the idea that, okay, I need to learn this skill, but I don't need to play like that. So everything becomes like, no, you're trying to change me. If I'm teaching a young conservatory student and I'm saying, well, you need to be able to play some chord melody, you need to be able to harmonize a melody, and they're like, no, right now I'm in this phase where I only play as a horn player, then it can become a thing about, or you're trying to change the way I play, and that's not really what this is about. And I had being a little bit older, I could tell that I really had that a little bit more. I was maybe a little bit more better equipped to pull more out of the teachers and also not get into conflicts. I think that made more of a difference, to be honest. I mean, they offered me to to actually shorten the education when I did the first year, and then in the end, I chose not to because I just liked studying and I was just playing. Like, I mean, you have to imagine how great it is to go to school and then you're just playing with people twice a day, 5 days a week, and then the weekend you're playing gigs.
Yeah.
It's and you don't have to think about anything else. I would still do that if I could.
Yeah, I remember my teachers at uni, they often used to say, look, you appreciate this time while you're here because you may not get another chance like this for a long, long time, and you'll notice that actually. I'm sure you found that as well, Jens. People that do come and study maybe online later on, they might have done it when they were very young, but then they've done another career for like 40 years and they're finally retired and they finally get to do what they should have done all the way back then.
Yeah, no, definitely. I see that quite a bit actually, and also and surely you also know this that sometimes later on in life, like there's now music is also work, so there are gonna be times when you're really motivated to learn a lot of new things, and there are other times where you're just sort of trying to keep your jobs and then you're just doing your work, right? For the rest, like life happens and you have family and kids and a normal life as well. And then you'll have other periods where you're like, okay, now I really want to try to learn something new. I get really passionate about learning something and exploring something for yourself. And then you can get back into it and you can remember, okay, this was how it went. For me, at least, that's also been what I really found useful was just hanging out with a lot of colleagues and jamming and doing stuff that's not work has been super useful for me in terms of just keeping motivated. And I also say that to the degree that that's possible for students that I have, if they can find people, even if you're just hanging out with another guitar player and playing some songs or something, it really does make such a huge difference for motivation and also for how fast you learn, simply just because it becomes much more real. So if that is possible, then that's definitely something you want to do.
Where did this take you after that? And like, who have you had the opportunity to play with over the years? And what are you doing now from a performance point of view?
Ah, great. Yeah. So I've been really lucky to have to play because I can read. I think that's from classical guitar. Actually, I read relatively well. So I played quite a lot of big band, and that means that I've also played in a lot of projects where I got to perform with fairly famous people because I'm in a professional big band now called Conrad Koselleck Big Band, where we're playing a lot. And some of that will be just with the big band. I'll get featured myself also once in a while. But I've also had the chance to be a sideman to people like, Michael Brecker once is probably the most famous one.
Nice.
Also one of the biggest concerts I've ever played, actually. I played with Chris Cheek, and I performed at North Sea with Slide Hampton, the trombone player, and stuff. So there's been a lot of opportunities to play sort of different things in terms of meeting famous people and playing with them. Mostly, I of course play with the people around here in the scene in The Hague or in Holland. I'm kind of lazy with it because I'm working online, so I'm just a sideman most of the time. I used to. The whole thing started with my band Trapping, where we were really busy promoting it and investing time in that. But with the online business like this, where this is a lot going on into making videos and stuff like that, then I'm more just waiting for people to call me and making sure that I enjoy those concerts. And then of course with Conrad, some of that is like huge concerts and concert halls and stuff like that. But a lot of it is also just small jazz clubs around the country. And that's what I do mostly. But I have had, like last year, I was in Taiwan for a week to play at a festival in Taichung, which I think is the biggest concert I've ever played. I think there were 20,000 people in the audience.
Awesome, man.
Which is, that's not your average jazz club.
No. Yeah, it's a bit different to the smoky bar with 20 people in the audience sort of thing.
Exactly. And it's also quite shocking that they have, but that's also, of course, the effect that you have of having sort of these big cultural festivals that they have there, and that then you will put on a concert and then there's going to be a whole park full of people showing up to hear what's going on. And it's also been really weird to, especially if I go to concerts, to sort of be recognized, which
Ah,
is
yes.
also me. Because as you know really well, we're just sitting in a room making videos, talking to a camera. We're not really, I mean, we're talking to people, and we know, kind of know who we're talking to, but they're not there. So you're not used to when you run into them. And they're like
Yeah.
meet people who are like, oh, I've watched a lot of your videos. Or NAM was the first time was pretty mind blowing for that. So going there.
Yeah, so you would have bumped into people every 10 seconds probably that knew who you were, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So I for me that was completely mind blowing. You run into people once every few minutes and that know you and want to have taken a picture. And then I also had the first time I was there, I ran into Rick Beato, and then I was walking with him,
Oh,
and that
far
was
out.
10 times worse.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
Most
yeah.
people did wanted me to take a picture of him because they never heard of me.
Yeah, yeah. Rick does some great YouTube as well, but yeah, you can see he's really focusing like pan style, pan instruments. So yeah, it's quite an interesting model that he's taken that's really taken off for him. So, but coming back to your YouTube channel, Jens, like, well, obviously it's worked incredibly well for you. What do you think attributes your success? Is it the way that you're teaching? Do you think is it your uniqueness, your angle?
I mean, in a way, I'm probably not the one to ask about it, but at the same time, like I started making lessons because there were things that I wanted that I felt, okay, this is not being taught very often, and this could be better. This is useful, and also stuff that I saw, well, when I teach it like this really works for my students. So I guess there was sort of a little bit like a crystallized version of what I'd seen worked for me, and that made it useful for a lot of people that you think about it in those terms. I think also what makes a difference is that jazz education is still pretty young, right? We haven't been doing, if you compare this to classical.
That's what I found because similar to you, Jens, I transitioned to a from classical to more a jazz focused, and I went through all the grades as a kid. Like as in Australia, we have like a grading system, and you kind of go up those levels and things like that. And
Mhm.
I think that's what I found quite perplexing getting into jazz is that there does seem to be a real lack of structure and consistency, and I guess partly is because obviously everyone's kind of developing their own style and sound and concepts, but it feels like there's a gap for people just wanting to get the starting point to establishing their own style. There's a bit of a chasm that you got to build something over there, you know.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the methods were developed by people who were performers
Mm, mm.
and who were teaching at a high level. I mean, I don't know how you experienced this. I would say, like, I had a lot of good lessons when I was in the conservatory getting my degree, but I was also a lot of stuff that I had to figure out for myself.
Mm, mm.
There's a lot of stuff that I didn't have any lessons on at all, or if I asked about it, I didn't get any kind of real answer to it. Uh, so, so those are the kind of things where you start thinking about, well, what works and what doesn't work. And for me, especially, sort of what made me think about that was teaching at the young talent department because it's just such a different thing. You really cannot apply the same method that you were taught if you were an adult to a 12-year-old who has to learn to play, take the A train or autumn leaves, you know. So you have to sort of figure out, okay, how are we gonna get this to work in any kind of way? And also they immediately have to play it with other people. So you kind of realize, okay, there's got to be a different way to work on this. And that kind of made me realize a lot of things in terms of making it difficult for yourself if you're self-studying also.
Mm,
Like
mm.
one thing that I think nobody ever talks about is you need to be able to hear the voicings that you play. And if you play a voicing with a lot of extensions, then maybe you don't really, it's difficult to hear in the beginning. So there's a reason why you want to start with really simple chords in the beginning so that you're hearing the important notes first and don't get lost in this kind of vague picture of a lot of extensions in
Mm,
there. And in that way, if you start like that, you actually have a stronger foundation in developing your ear and getting that side in there. I think especially ear training is often made sort of mysterious and only it's like you need to have perfect pitch to learn to play jazz almost. And if you don't have it, you're never gonna have it, gonna learn it, and all those kind of things. And you can actually learn a lot of stuff if you just approach it in a more step-by-step manner, you know, and also incorporate it into how you learn
mm.
to improvise. That it's it's much easier to approach that you're relying on the things that you already know. Most of us will have a decent sense of tonality just from all the music we've heard all our life. That could actually, I'm curious if that's kind of changing right now. I'm from a country where they sing a lot, so I really do have a sense of a tonality and melody, and in that way, that's something I can tap into when I'm learning. And also, it's something you really do need to develop if you want to play jazz, because mostly jazz is tonal. And what I found was that, especially all the modes and all that kind of thing, chord scale stuff, that's like a very practical, sort of very rule-based way of learning to play jazz, but it completely cuts off the ear. It's all in your brain.
Yep. Yep.
Where I think it's probably better to just start with, okay, what's the bigger picture? What is it? Okay, you need to learn a song. What key is it in? How far you get just by playing the key, even if it doesn't fit everywhere, like where does it go wrong, and how do you fix that?
Have you actually tried learning a song? They're just doing the sort of exercises, those, like, as you say, modal scales or things like this, and like there's a few tricks there, but have you actually learned how to play a standard or something like that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So and that also, yeah, that definitely also becomes a thing. And also, I guess I was always kind of lucky because I was always really focused on playing with other people. That was what I enjoyed.
Right.
So learning songs was just something I always wanted to do because that was what I needed. I couldn't really use modal scales for anything if I couldn't put it into a song. So that definitely was there. And that's also that, yeah, so that really becomes the thing. Like, okay, what is the real goal here? You want to play a solo, you don't want to know what mixolydian is. You want to play something that sounds great over a dominant chord. And preferably over that dominant chord in that song, right? It's more practical way of looking at things, and more like, okay, you're not going to practice stuff that you're not going to use. And I answer this question every week when people say, oh, I need to learn all the modes of melodic minor, harmonic minor, and so on. I'm like, well, you're never going to need all of them. And if you don't know any songs, why are you spending time on this? Just learn some songs, learn the scales that you need for the songs. Start with that and make it real, make it music so that it's really something that you can use, because if it's just going to be a bunch of exercises, you're never going to remember it. It's going to be meaningless, and it's impossible to really get into your system to the degree you can do something with it. Nobody got into jazz because they wanted to know how to play mixolydian flat 9, flat 13.
You got to really just immerse yourself in the music, listen to it a lot, you know, like you just really got to fall in love with it. I think that's where the magic really starts to happen, and all of a sudden things start to become more simple because you can, that helps your ear, you know, like rather than all those theoretical constructs, which can be helpful for certain levels of development, but yeah, people are really jumping the gun often, aren't they?
I think so too. I mean, and also that is of course where we started with it. Like you find some music that you like, and then you start figuring out like, okay, what is it, you know? And I think my story about it being sort of Charlie Parker or Schofield, and you listen to it and you're like, I get the blues part, and then there's like this difficult thing that I'm like really curious about what that is because I have absolutely no idea. And then you sort of bang your head against the wall trying to figure that out, and that's where it sort of got to come from. And also that's still like the thing that you learn the most from is indeed from listening. So Joe DiOrio was quoted for saying that half the time you practice should be spent listening.
Oh, right. Amazing.
And I think there's definitely some truth to that. I think that's food for thought for sure. And also the people that I'm around that I think play well are really listening a lot to jazz. That's definitely. Yeah, I'm still transcribing solos and learning them. Well, transcribing. I'm not transcribing them. I'm learning them by ear.
I really liked how you used the word curious, because you seem like a very interested, curious person, you know, like interested, how does this work? And I reckon Joe Pass was like that as well, because I remember, I think on one video I saw of Joe Pass, he was talking about, you know, the guitar is like a puzzle, you know, it's a fun thing to solve, you know, like, so if you have that kind of curiosity, you know, approach to it, you're interested in working out how this puzzle works, like that's kind of what makes you good in a way, because then it sticks. Well, like, because you know what it's like once you really work out how a piece of like a phrase functions in the context of a harmony, and you've really solved that, and you know how it works, then it does tend to stay with you rather than just like someone handing you something and then you kind of go, oh yeah, I must learn those 50 billion scales, you know.
Yeah, definitely. But surely you also had this thing where you figured out a phrase. At least I've had that so many times. And that's indeed sort of the curious thing that you're wondering, why does this work? Because one thing is figuring out like why the notes work. It's not so difficult to figure that out. Often that's quite easy to figure out. Once you start learning solos, and then you realize that people play really basic stuff most of the time. That's really not, that's not what makes it great. It's not the fancy sharp 11 flat 5 flat something scale. It's just there's something else. It's not going to be the note, because you can teach people to play the right notes, and you can play the right notes and sound nothing like jazz. That's actually quite easy to do, because it's not about, that's just harmony. That doesn't make it jazz. You can, like, there's lots of pop music that actually uses the same harmony, and it has nothing to do with what you would consider jazz, what you would listen to and say, okay, this really sounds like jazz. So there's this whole other layer of phrasing and rhythm and dynamics and melody that the only way we had to learn that until now, not the only way, but a lot of that has been something you learned by learning solos and learning vocabulary, and indeed checking out licks and stuff like that. But it is also something where, and there is the Rippiato interview with Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny talks about how you can get a college degree in harmony and in rhythm, but you can't get one in melody. And I think that's something that is going to come, that we're going to get better at describing it. It's not so much that you need to have a college degree in it. It's more that we actually have something to say about it that doesn't go like that, that doesn't stop after 2 sentences, because that's really where it was at, you know, except for maybe people like Barry Harris, who had his completely own system, but he really did describe the traditional melody.
And that's what's interesting. Like, how do I sound good at jazz, someone might ask, but the answer really is hiding in plain sight. If you want to sound like someone that really inspires you, do what Wes Montgomery did and literally play along with that person that inspired you. And you pick up, as you say, you don't just pick up the notes, you pick up all this subtle stuff that can't be written on a page. You know, just the way they turn into one note, or they kind of just emphasize a certain way of finishing a phrase. That's stuff that it's very hard to teach, but it's very straightforward if you just really open your ears to a transcription and play along, you know.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's really nails it. Because I was never giving any sort of instructions on learning solos by ear, which is something that I think in hindsight would have been super useful for me. Like, okay, maybe start with this solo because it's not super difficult. Because I think what is needed there is also that you take it a step back and compare it to how we learn something like blues or rock, because we just listen to it so much that you can immediately say, oh, that's a blues phrase. Everybody knows what a blues phrase is with electric guitar. And you kind of need to have the same with jazz, but you do need to get to the point where you can tell, and that takes that amount of listening. So just being aware of that relationship with it is something that's sometimes missing when people are getting into jazz at a later age, that they don't realize, okay, I didn't first spend 6 years listening to AC/DC so that I know what a blues phrase sounds like, you know. And you kind of need to spend a few years listening to Chet Baker and Charlie Parker and whatever, but to have an idea about what a phrase sounds like.
Man, this was awesome information, Jens. You're providing a lot of value to everyone checking this out. Some final thoughts here, Jens, on this amazing conversation we've had tonight. Like, what do you think we as teachers can do to best help our students become accomplished players now? And like, I'm thinking of people that are more like educators rather than students now. Like, let's speak to them. Like, probably reiterating a lot of what we've talked about already, but is there some particular things that would help educators, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think this sort of the concept of keeping it practical, making sure that whatever you're teaching is not just a loose concept and something that actually you can point in a piece of music that the student has to learn and go, that's where you need it, and that's where I want to hear it. You know, I think that's definitely important. And then also just realizing, like, you have different students are different. So some people will have an easy time understanding a lot of theory or playing scales and can sort of deal with it. I've had one student that I gave the arpeggios to Fly Me to the Moon, and he actually came back a week later and played a solo that made sense, which was
Wow.
mind blowing. I never saw that again, I think. But it's like he was that just resonated so well with him that he could immediately put it to use, right, and make music with it. And for others, that can be much more difficult. Then you need to figure out, okay, as an educator, and that's not really possible on YouTube, but you need to sort of figure out what works for this student. So you sort of throw something at them, and then you kind of see what comes back and what you need to refine and sort of keep figuring out, okay, this part of it needs to be emphasized for it to work. And that's like listening to the student is probably the advice I'm trying to give, I guess.
Really empathizing with where the student's at. That's the vibe
Yeah.
I'm getting from what you're saying, and really like not imputing how necessarily you would learn it, but really trying to unlock a way for them to find that way, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think also that's been, for me, it's been because I'm teaching online and I'm teaching all this stuff where I'm just broadcasting information. And that's really the only way to do it when you're doing YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that. Then once I started finally making online courses, that I have this component in there that I offer that people can post videos and get feedback on them, because that means that you can sort of help them figure out if they're getting the material right, or if they're not noticing something, because I just have way more experienced ears, so I will immediately hear if their phrasing is completely off in a certain way, and I can just, because the first part of learning something is of course awareness, so I can point it out and then ask them, can you hear this? And if you listen to how he plays in this solo, can you hear what is different? You know, those kind of things, those conversations in the community really makes a difference. And also, I have to say, being a teacher, it's super rewarding to do that, because it is a little bit weird to be used to sort of sitting across from a student and teaching them something, and then sort of you can already feel when you're explaining it whether it's going to work or not from how they react to it, right?
Yeah.
And YouTube just doesn't have that. I believe that this works, so usually I'll go with, I know this works for students. I hope it works for all of you guys. Here you go. You know? And that's been really interesting for the roadmap. And also it's really helped me being able to clarify certain things and teach some things better, because I realized, like, okay, once they're going through that material, some things will be stumbling blocks, and I can already start talking about it earlier, or I can point to certain things that will help them, you know, and that's been great to see. Also, just seeing people get better is just, as a teacher, of course, really what you want.
It's the best, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have that in the membership as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, we do a membership, and I just sometimes I feel like they're getting better than me. You know, so I have to, like, I've got Ryan, who's an amazing player, with me now, and but I think that's satisfying as a teacher when you see people go so far, and that's what amazed me about the online kind of vehicle, is that, you know, it really can work for people, you know, if they put the effort in and they, you know, post videos on our platforms and that sort of thing. If you get involved and put in, people tend to get out a lot of that. And I think with, as you say, with the video recording element, people simply seeing themselves play is something that we didn't really do much when I was going through university, you know, like, but like basically recording yourself, like that's what made me better as a player, like doing these YouTube videos and looking at myself and going, oh, you know, I'm going to do that solo again because, oh yeah, I can see that I wanted to change that a bit. But our students do that now, you know, so I think, it's a very, like, it was interesting. There was a player, Paul Galbraith, a classical player, who had a mentor who he attributes to his success as a guitarist. But this mentor was more a philosopher. He wasn't even a musician. And this guy, he would just like hang out and play to him and stuff. And this philosopher guy would just record him. And then they would just watch Paul Galbraith playing. So he would sit there and just basically ask Paul Galbraith, okay, so what did you think of this? You know, so self-critique. It's one of the most powerful ways for improvement, I think.
Definitely. And that is true. I also find that it's been very useful for me to record myself so much, and you get used to it. And then that becomes a way of teaching, and you can really tell like, okay, I'm really getting better at this. And of course also with any recording, like, oh, I still need to work on this. It's never enough, but it is that is true, and sort of getting that in there, that you can that the only way to learn, if you want to teach yourself, or if you don't have an in-person teacher and you want to have feedback, you do need to have that distance. You cannot judge what's going on while you're playing.
Yeah.
It's just, there's too much going on. You really don't know.
And once again, congratulations for your amazing success online, and also in your live settings with all this success as a performer as well. Yeah, well, let's talk about where people can find you. Obviously, if they type in Jens Larsen, so Jens Larsen, and just type in jazz guitar on YouTube, I'm sure they'll have no trouble finding you at all. Let's talk a little bit about your program that you're working through with your students that you talked a little bit about earlier. It's called the Jazz Guitar Roadmap, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's a course it's been around for a bit. Indeed, I think the first thing, if you're curious about what I do, the YouTube channel is where you want to start, because that's the best way to get an impression of how I teach, who I am, also just as a person. The roadmap is sort of a course in foundational jazz guitar, learning just some really basic things. It's really based on learning a song and sort of building everything up step by step. I think one of the most difficult things about learning online, if you're teaching yourself, is finding the right material. That's very difficult because there's just so much material, and you cannot put it together in a method. And also because the way algorithms work, we can't really make it a method, because that doesn't work as content. So we don't really do that. And I'm sure we all tried, but it just doesn't work. At least I know I've tried.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So I stopped doing that, and I'm just making everything independent. Yeah. So the roadmap is really just from the ground up, learning a song and learning to solo, learning what notes to play, but also learning how to make your own solo, how to make your own lines, what makes them better, what are the right notes is one thing, but that's actually only a small part of it, because what's really important is actually what you do with those notes, and practicing how to create your own lines. The foundation I have from Barry Harris, because that was important for me, but it's also just sort of my take on it. It's a very practical guitar take on it. It's been unbelievably well received, which I never thought. I have more than 5,000 students by now, which is insane, you know.
Oh, congratulations, man. That's amazing.
For me, so seeing using the community aspect of it has been really great for both the students. Not everybody does, but for the students who do, and also for me as a teacher, that's definitely been rewarding to see. And you can find that linked in all my videos also.
Check out Jens on YouTube and his Jazz Guitar Roadmap program. But Jens Larsen, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you and hang out tonight. You dropped some amazing knowledge bombs for everyone keen to learn jazz on guitar, and really loved what you were talking about really listening to the music and I think you're really getting to the heart of jazz through your approach to teaching and playing. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Jens. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be a guest on this podcast. I mean, I know your material for so long by now. It's interesting to meet people like this also.
Yeah, it's a real thrill. Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah.